Okay, just some of the commonly abused opiate, synthetic opiate drugs that we're seeing on the street and that we're taking from people. We know are being abused locally. Narcotic painkillers, which include Vicodin, Perc, Opana, Oxycodone, which is, part of our primary focus tonight, which is the Perc 30s. Morphine and heroin. We all know heroin, which is outside of this class, but is linked to it. Some of our other speakers are going to elaborate further on that connection between the two. What is a Perc 30? It's oxycodone hydrochloride. It has the same ingredient as Oxycontin, which I'm sure most of us are familiar with after the years that's been on the media as a problem. Perc 30s, as they're known on the street, are actually 30 milligrams of oxycodone mixed with acetaminophen. And I'm not going to get into the physiology of the drug because I don't have the technical expertise, but I do know enough to know that some of the people that we're encountering are taking so much Perc 30 that they're bombarding their livers with acetaminophen, taking 3, 5, 7 pills a day in order to maintain the levels of opiates that they need in their system. And how this is going to affect the community and tax our medical system in the future with all these addicts, they're going to suffer further medical problems as they age. We're finding that the Perc 30s are now very popular with high school and college age students. They've become a recreational drug. Again, there's going to be further elaboration on that further in the program. And these pills, the Perc 30s, are cheaper than the Oxycontin pills, which were basically their predecessors on the street as an abused narcotic. Perc 30, this is just a picture of one of the examples of Perc 30s, and a lot of times we'll see them. And for your own identification purposes, they're very small round pills. And there's a couple different forms. One of the things that you might find further if you ever come across something like this is there's excellent pill identifiers available online that you can type in the imprints on the drug and find out immediately what it is. Don't ever take at face value if you find your child with a drug. What they tell you it is, because the first thing they'll tell us when we encounter them on the street is it's for my allergies. Okay? Fortunately for us, we have computers in our cars, we have computers in our phones, and we can immediately identify what those drugs are. So utilize those types of resources. How these Perc 30s are being abused, there's several different ways. They're being taken orally, nasally, where they chop them up, grind them up, and then they snort them, which is what we're seeing predominantly with this type of drug. They can be smoked, and we've seen that. We've talked to people who've smoked them, and they're being injected. And again, from our perspective, this is something that we see every day. We have chances to speak to these kids either after arrest or prior to arrest during interventions. We'll debrief these kids. We'll speak to them. We'll say, tell us. We need to know what's going on. Sometimes it's done in lieu of charges because it increases the amount of knowledge we have as an agency and assists us in fighting these. And when the kids tell you what they're doing and who's using these, and the particular kids that are using them, it really blows your mind. You can't believe it. You know these kids, you've gone to them, you've seen them play football, you've seen them do sports, you've seen them in the community, and to find out that they're abusing these drugs, I can only say that it's an absolute eye-opener. Opiates are extremely addictive, and I'm not going to get far into the addiction properties because that's going to be handled later, but I can briefly say that users need more and more of the drug to achieve the high. They quickly develop a physiological dependency, which increases the threat level because they can become addicted so fast, and they won't even know what's happening until it's too late. Users also suffer from extreme withdrawals when they don't have the drug, and opiates are both physically and psychologically addictive. Now, the power of this addiction, I can only tell you from what we've seen in the other offices in this room that we've dealt with these people, is it's amazing what they will do when this happens, when they become addicted. The typical day of an opiate addict. From the time they first wake up, their primary focus is get enough money to buy drugs. This is typical of all types of opiate addicts, whether it's Percs, Oxycontin, or heroin. They no longer care about school, work, family, friends, or their future. And they're forced to live for the moment. Now, a couple things about that slide. To say that they no longer care about their family, and we're all parents here, and I'm a parent, and to think that that could possibly happen to my kids, I would never want to believe it. But the addiction is so powerful that there's nothing that they can do to stop this. I mean, it's very difficult. Without the proper intervention and treatment, they are slaves to the addiction. And it's very difficult for them to do anything but to try and get the drugs. And a perfect example is this morning when we came in, we immediately had to bring someone to court because they had to be forced into hospitalization because they were risking themselves for drugs. And we were out there. I know the parent of this child. It's the third time that we've had to do this. And I can only tell you that it's heart-wrenching for the parent of this child to go through this, to get the child to court so that he can be hospitalized and to have him get out of the car and run down the street and disappear. And this is how strong the addiction is and how traumatic it can be for a family. What opiate addicts become? They become miserable, desperate beyond belief, inmates in jail or prison. They can become dead, and they become liars, robbers, and thieves. And real quickly on this slide, because I've been to so many overdoses, I've been there, I've had to do CPR on people who have died from opiate abuse, from overdoses. I've also been there, and I've been able to work to help revive these people. Okay, and they've been treated, and some of them have been able to be successful in their recovery. But if you go to enough of these, you can see that they're going to keep using, even if it's at risk to their own lives. And again, this goes back to the desperation that the drug creates. Prescription opiates can lead to addiction and/or death. It's a new breed of gateway drugs. These drugs are often abused they'll start in high school. And once the addiction develops, they increase oftentimes to Oxycontin and heroin. Again, I'm not going to get too much further into that because that'll be discussed later. Before I move on, though, I just want to discuss that term, new breed of gateway drugs. And again, a lot of us know gateway drugs as tobacco, alcohol, marijuana, things that we learned about when we were growing up and how they affect kids, and they can turn into drug addiction that can be negative, very, very negative for those people. This we consider a new breed because you can take somebody who's never used drugs, who's never been on the wrong track, somebody who's in college doing well, and suddenly they're exposed to this drug, and the transformation is like overnight. Once they become addicted to an opiate, they can go from using, say, Perc 30s recreationally to a full-blown heroin addict, which is about as bad as we can see a person on a downward spiral, is when they become intravenous, needle users of heroin. And that's how quick it can happen. So you can look at your own child and say, this is not something that would happen to my kid because they've never been like that. It really doesn't matter. And again, it goes to the threat level of this particular drug. This is just a quick example of the financial cost to do these drugs, and this particular example is for Oxycontin. An 80 milligram pill a day would be $70. If that person were using 1 pill a day, it would be $70 a day. If they were using 1 pill a day, it would be $490 a week, almost $2,000 a month, and over $25,000 a year. And for our purposes, you can see that how difficult it would be for a kid to keep up with that type of addiction. And a perfect example is, I have a friend of mine whose daughter was never in trouble, who became an Oxycontin user and couldn't afford the addiction anymore and ended up doing a robbery of a convenience store and ended up in jail for 2 years. This is a kid who had basically no criminal record, no history of substance abuse. I had known her since she was probably 3 years old, and I had to see this family go through this. So again, the financial cost creates a downward spiral of criminal activity that's associated with the drug. Real quick, just some warning signs that you might want to look for, and this is just to give you a base, so when you do your further examination, investigation on your own, you'll have some idea. Constricted pupils are associated with opiate use, and they're noticeably small. The black center part of the eye will shrink down to a point where it stands out in the room. You'll know it when you see it. New friends that you haven't seen before, it's always a sign. Drops in grades, lethargy, always sick and tired, they can't get out of bed. Strange visits from people you don't know with no explanation, can often be drug deals. Needle marks, which often come later in the addiction. Lack of money, stealing money and missing valuables is huge. And again, from what we've seen, these kids will steal and sell their parents' wedding rings. They'll steal it from their grandparents. It doesn't matter. It's too strong of an addiction. So when things start missing, you have to see through the lies and believe that there could potentially be a problem. Whether it's your own kid or a friend of yours comes to you with the problem, recognize the signs. Shakes, weight loss, appearance change, missing school or work. Again, just information. There is information out there that you can find that will show you these signs and symptoms in detail. So hopefully our resources will point you in that direction. Okay, the best strategy, as we believe at the North Reading Police Department through our work with the CIT, is prevention, early intervention, and rehabilitation through collaboration. And basically what that means is we want to try and prevent it through awareness. Okay, we want to absolutely step in for early intervention as soon as there's a problem so we can stop it before the addiction gets too strong. And then we want to work through rehabilitation. Okay, and the only way we're going to do that is through a collaborative community effort. So we're going to put the processes in place so that you guys can comfortably work with us as a police department and as a community to try and address these issues. You shouldn't try and take these on yourself if you're forced to deal with them. You should use the resources and our expertise and our resources to address this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next to present the role of criminal courts and probation in fighting the regional drug problem is Vince Pirro and Mike Higgins. Vince Pirro is the Chief Probation Officer at Woburn District Court. He has over 20 years of service and experience in his field. Probation Officer Mike Higgins, also assigned to Woburn District Court, has over 30 years of service and experience in this field. Please welcome Chief Probation Officer Vince Pirro and Probation Officer Mike Higgins.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us. I'd like to thank you for coming. I don't think there's much more we can add after Tommy's presentation. It was very, not only educational, thorough, covered all the bases. We could take every one of those PowerPoint issues and just talk about them all night. Chief Murphy threatened Mike and I to be about 10 to 15 minutes. I'm sure everybody's okay with that. I've been the Chief Probation Officer for 7 years. I've been in the criminal justice system for over 20. I had 3 years in the House of Correction as a caseworker. I grew up in the city of Somerville. And when I first took the job in Woburn 19 years ago, I never imagined that the problems were so relevant opposed to Somerville and the city streets as they were in the suburbs such as Woburn, which covers our jurisdiction, Woburn District Court. Covers Burlington, Reading, North Reading, Stoneham, Winchester, Woburn, and Wilmington. And Mike's going to elaborate on some other issues about the drug trends that we're seeing. You got a great panel up here. I can't believe what a great presentation we've already gotten so far. And as far as we see it with the HEAT program, which stands for Heroin Education Awareness Task Force, knowledge is power. The more education you have, the better prepared you are to prevent and to educate other parents, family members. And it's a sad time. It's a sad time that it's such a strong issue in every community. I have to once again give kudos to the North Reading Police Department and the entire community because this is one of the best presentations, well organized, and the information is getting out to you, and the effort that was put on to have this tonight is really remarkable. So I really have to give my hat off to that. So Heroin Education Awareness Task Force, we started over 7 years ago. And why we started this program was as a community, and Chief Murphy at the time was one of the pioneers of that program. We had a bunch of overdoses, fatal overdoses, in an extreme amount in 2005. A couple moved from North Reading, unfortunately. And so as a community in our entire jurisdiction, we came together and we basically said there's something going on, we have to get to the bottom of it. There was a lack of treatment services, there was a lack of education, there was a lack of effort, and a lot of people, once again, some really affluent communities that we were serving, weren't aware of the issues at hand. And especially today in today's day and age, we have a lot of single